Well, it seems like the left is finally back in the United States. The victory of Zohran Mamdani is a powerful blow to the political establishment of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Now, all indications are that this is very different from anything from AOC or any other Democrat that had previously won an election. This is, in my view, a game changer of the political situation in the United States. And I think while it's surprising and kind of shocking to see, it shouldn't be, because something like this was eventually going to happen. There would eventually come a time where the people of this country, the working class of this country, pushes back against the decades and decades of neoliberalism, of the just blatant control of the government and the economy by the billionaires, by the ruling class, by the capitalist class, pushing further and further, just taking more and more away from the working class of this country. And on the other hand, even though this is a mayoral election, everyone knows that foreign policy actually played a substantial role in it. The question of the genocide in Gaza, the question of Palestine, played a substantial role. And the levels of brutality of the Zionist entity against the people of Palestine, and the levels of just blind support given to the state of Israel, and every atrocity, every crime it's committed over the decades, would eventually lead to a pushback by the working class of this country. And we've seen it with the election of Zohran Mamdani. Now, despite all this, some people come to the conclusion that Mamdani is somehow controlled opposition. Some are claiming that he's the new Obama or new AOC or new Bernie Sanders. All of those labels are false. All indications to this point show quite the opposite. Now, the situation can always change. We will see when he's in office what he does. But as of this point in time, I would say, for my analysis of the situation, there are no grounds for these views that Mamdani is controlled opposition or that he will sell out to the establishment. But of course, at the end of the day, the biggest question is what the people of New York City, what his constituency will push him to do and hold him accountable on. That's the biggest question. Now, to go through those accusations against Mamdani, piece by piece, let's look at the accusation that he's the new Obama. Obama never claimed to be a socialist. He never claimed to be an anti-imperialist. He never campaigned against the actions of the State of Israel. And some will point out that Obama called Mamdani, had a phone call with Mamdani, but look at what happened. It's very noteworthy that Obama did not endorse Mamdani. And actually, in Mamdani's victory speech, he actually threw some shade at Obama. You'll notice in this piece right here.
We will leave mediocrity in our past. No longer will we have to open a history book for proof that Democrats can dare to be great.
That would include Obama there. So he's basically saying that for decades there hasn't been good leadership. That includes Obama there, 2009 to 2016. I think it's pretty obvious that he does not view Obama positively. Now, the question of AOC and Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders has gone so far as to say Israel, quote, has the right to defend itself as it's carrying out a genocide against the people of Gaza. Mamdani has never said anything of the kind. Now, he may have made some statements over the course of the campaign that were not strong enough in opposing the settler colonialism, the Zionist settler colonialism in Palestine. But on some very key and very powerful ways, Mamdani has not walked back very important positions on Palestine. For example, on numerous occasions, he was given the opportunity by the establishment media to walk back what he said about Netanyahu, that he would have Netanyahu arrested if he comes to New York City for the United Nations. He stood firm on that and said that, no, under international law, we will uphold our obligations to international law he is wanted as a war criminal and that he will have him arrested for that. Furthermore, he's actually, when asked, he's been confronted on the debate stage numerous times and pressured about the question of the state of Israel, what his view is. He's been asked if Israel, quote-unquote, has the right to exist as a, quote, Jewish state. And he actually never said that it does. All he said is that he believes in equal rights. Now, he has firmly rejected anti-Semitism, clearly, and pointed out that criticism of Zionism is not the same thing as anti-Semitism. Furthermore, on the question of socialism, AOC, when does she ever really talk about socialism? She doesn't. Ever since she got elected, she's hardly talked about socialism. To the extent that she's even mentioned socialism, she's really watered it down. At one point after getting elected, since she's been in office, she was asked about socialism and capitalism, and she said that she believes that she can be a socialist and a capitalist simultaneously. So what does socialism even mean? What does capitalism even mean to her? Mamdani, on the other hand, the night before the election, put out a video upholding, reaffirming socialism, not shying away from the term socialist. After winning the election, in his victory speech, he has reaffirmed this. He, at the opening of his victory speech, quoted Eugene Debs, the heroic American working class, socialist, anti-imperialist leader. The significance of that can't be underestimated, especially because one of the angles of criticism that people are coming at to criticize Mamdani is saying that he's pro-imperialism, which doesn't really make any sense at all. And the fact that he quoted Eugene Debs would indicate that he is quite firmly anti-imperialist. Again, Eugene Debs was a very important American anti-imperialist figure. If you're not familiar with him, I'd recommend you look into Eugene Debs and read his works. Another clear indication that Mamdani is very different from any of these other establishment politicians, and that he is in fact the real deal, is that when he was given the opportunity to condemn the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement, he actually didn't. He upheld it. Even when he was asked, oh, will that be the policy of New York City, which is that's a very loaded question and a very, potentially controversial, tricky question to answer. He didn't say no, actually. Now, of course, he couldn't explicitly say yes, but he did not say no. Think about that for a second. That is pretty damn good. Furthermore, some people are claiming that he is supporting the overthrow of the Latin American socialist countries, Venezuela and Cuba. No, in fact, in an interview recently, he was pressured multiple times to condemn the governments of Venezuela and Cuba as quote-unquote dictatorships, and actually he didn't. And you could see the interviewer repeatedly bringing this up and saying, oh, why are you so reluctant to call these countries dictatorships?
I have to ask you this question, just going back to socialismo. Mm-hmm. Do you think that Miguel Díaz-Canel in Cuba is a dictator?
I haven't thought much about Miguel Díaz, I'll be honest with you. I think mostly about these 5 boroughs and how we can actually deliver affordability for New Yorkers.
But do you think Nicolás Maduro is a dictator in Venezuela?
I think he has done many a horrible thing.
But again, do you think it's important that you say that they are dictators and that people understand here in New York that you are not aligned with them?
I think it's clear and it's important for me to showcase how this is a vision for the people of the city. And as you said, it is in stark contrast to the experiences that many others have had. And I think when I hear from a number of Venezuelan New Yorkers about what drove them to come to this city, the conditions that they had to live through, I understand their skepticism. I understand their caution. And yet I have found in them an understanding that my vision is one that is distinct from that experience.
Yeah, but I wonder if you're reluctant to call them dictators in Cuba and Venezuela.
I'm not reluctant. I just haven't thought about them that often, I'll be honest.
Now keep in mind, this is all when he's on the campaign trail, when he would want to tone down some of these more quote-unquote radical positions that he has. So I think it's pretty clear that Mamdani is way different from AOC or Bernie Sanders. Now the question is, when he gets into office, I don't think it's so much a question of him as a politician, so much as it is what the establishment will successfully or unsuccessfully stop him from implementing. So people claiming that Mamdani is a sellout or not worth supporting, they are way off. They're really grasping at straws. In many cases, they're just lying. And furthermore, people in Palestine are celebrating Mamdani's victory. They're not looking at this from some position of ideological purity, as some people are. They're looking at this and seeing that this is a shift in the correct direction. This is a shift in the direction that will potentially help them. Because, again, no matter what Mamdani does in office, and I would say indications seem very positive on that, but just the fact that he won, to a large extent, this election was a referendum on the genocide in Gaza, with Cuomo being such an open, extreme Zionist, going to the extent of being on the defense team of Netanyahu, the brutal war criminal, and the media and the other people that he's running against constantly bringing up things like, quote-unquote, globalize the intifada and all kinds of things related to Palestine and the question of Zionism. They were constantly trying to bring this up to attack him. And it turned out that was all to his benefit, because public opinion has shifted in favor of Palestine. And this election, at the very least, is a victory on that front. At the very least, it showed that all of the innocent people murdered by Israel, that their lives matter, and that we were not going to put someone in office that was such an extreme defender of this genocide. And people in Palestine have celebrated this victory. And that alone, I think, should tell you a lot. And let's remember, the Democratic Party establishment did not support him. Chuck Schumer did not endorse him. Since when does the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer, not endorse the Democrat in the race? They did not want him to win. Not only because of the question of Palestine, but because of his whole working class agenda. Now, when Mamdani takes office, the entire political establishment, the entire capitalist ruling class is going to try and sabotage him economically. Just as they've done in any country where socialists or communists have taken power, the ruling elite do everything to try and sabotage the economy and then try and turn around and say, so look, you see, socialism doesn't work. They're going to try and do that with Mamdani. And Mamdani is going to need all of the support that he can get to back him up on his positions, especially if he follows through on his key position of arresting Netanyahu. Can you imagine how the Trump regime will respond to that? How the Zionist lobby, how the intelligence agencies, the police force here in New York City, or let's remember the NYPD, does training with the Israeli military. So if he's going to do this, he's going to need massive support from the people to back him up. And that's why I think it's so important for people to stop these ridiculous attacks against him. Because if we actually want him to be a champion for the working class, if we actually want him to be an anti-imperialist, he needs the support of the people. He needs the support of the left. He needs the support of the Palestine movement. He needs support of the broad masses overall if he's going to carry these things out. And of course, like any politician, he needs to be held accountable when he's in office. And I think he'd probably be one of the first people that would tell you that when he's in office, he would want you to hold him accountable. And that's what we're going to have to do. If he does something wrong, which I'm certain that there will be disappointments. Any politician within the framework of a capitalist system, there will be disappointments. But what I would hope for and what things seem to indicate is that on the key questions, he will fight to deliver. And for him to succeed, he will need the people behind him, because the forces of the ruling class, the forces of capitalism, of imperialism, will try and do everything to stop him, because this isn't just about New York City, which in and of itself is the most powerful city in the country. Its economic power throughout the United States and internationally even is massive. So just because of that, they will try to stop him. But this is also bigger than New York City. This sets an example to other parts of the country. This sets examples to other cities that the working class can actually win. And that's what needs to happen next. Across the country and other cities, candidates like this need to look at what Mamdani did and his successful, unprecedented, successful campaign, and study it and implement this where they are and start winning in their local areas. Because if we really want to transform this country, it can't just be New York, it has to be across the country. And then when that happens, we can really start making some powerful changes and really start pushing for a working class agenda, an anti-imperialist agenda. So I'm very hopeful about the future. At the same time, I'm cautious because I know what we are up against and that the ruling class will stop at nothing to hold on to their power. But things are finally going in the right direction. This is a win for the left. This is a win for the working class. This is a win for the pro-Palestine movement. But this is not a time to let your guard down or to get lazy, because the hardest fight is yet ahead. Once he's in office, that's when the real fight begins.